Hey everyone, good morning. I am Rebecca Friedman, the director of the Wolfsonian Public Humanities Lab at Florida International University. And I'm so proud to welcome you to another episode of Coffee and Conversations, telling community stories.
And I'm Julio Capo Jr., the Deputy Director of the WPHL, and we're so thrilled that you could join us today. And we're really excited to be here with one of our dear community partners and friends, the Museum of Graffiti in Wynwood. I look forward to learning so much more about the museum that looks into especially the pandemic day eras and learn more about their ongoing work with our many intersecting communities.
But before we begin, let me tell you a little bit of background about our series. We're now in our fourth season, and we started Coffee and Conversations at the beginning of the coronavirus pandemic as a way of strengthening community ties and learning more about how our community partners were coping with this new environment. And we moved through a series on the histories of anti-Blackness in museum spaces and beyond. And then in the third season, we explored new works of literature with the Miami Book Fair. With this season, Telling Community Stories, we're highlighting the incredible work of our 8 trusted community partners, including the Museum of Graffiti. We are embarking on a new journey with them, all 8 of them, as part of a major grant funded by the Mellon Foundation to digitize parts of their collection and to create new oral histories and new archives and to preserve their stories for generations to come.
So briefly, because I want to get into the conversation, our format is simple and it lasts roughly about 30 minutes. We'll ask our fabulous guest, can't wait to introduce, a few questions, and then we'll take a few questions from the audience at any time. This live webinar, please just submit a question below. The Q&A question button, I should say, is below on your screen. So at any moment, just kind of intervene and we'll be sure to facilitate that.
And so today we have the great honor of welcoming and being in conversation with Allison. I may mispronounce your last name because I forgot to ask. Freidin. Okay, have Allison Freidin, who is the co-director and the co-founder of the Museum of Graffiti in Wynwood, and an amazing woman, human being all around.
Yes.
And we're so excited to talk with you. Can you first just start by telling us just a bit about the Museum of Graffiti, when and how it came into existence, and just anything you want about all of the amazing and necessary work that you guys do?
Sure. The Museum of Graffiti is located in the heart of Wynwood, on the same block as the Wynwood Wall. So the back of our business kind of hits catty corner with the back of their business. The museum is the first in the world to specifically set goals to archive, preserve, exhibit, and celebrate specifically the graffiti genre. So we get all the time a question, well, what's the difference between graffiti and street art? And that is a great question and a common misconception as to where the lines are blurred. So what the museum does in its everyday operations is we distinguish graffiti and street art based on graffiti being really predicated around an art form predicated around the formation of the letter. Street art can be more character-based, more scenic-based, realism, all sorts of the different genres of art can be replicated on a larger scale and sort of deemed street art, whether it's abstract or whatever it is. But we really look at graffiti as an art form predicated on the formation of the letter. We opened our doors to be as the first museum in the world to do this December 4th of 2019. We were highly celebrated. We really appreciated the support of our media partners, the New York Times. You really couldn't take a step in any direction, at least in Miami, without hearing about this new endeavor, only to enter COVID a couple months later. So anything that we had planned for, any path that we had planned to walk down was quickly torn apart, kind of like a tornado passing through. And we quickly pivoted and we're back open, up and running. It's very different than what we had ever imagined, but we're here and we're happy and we're super excited to work with FIU. And I just wanted to say thank you for having me. That probably should have been the first thing out of my mouth, but better late than never.
Thank you, Allison. But there's so much in there in what you just said, and I want to kind of like unpack all of it. Just very briefly, if I could just, you know, graffiti and street art, both of them, not one or the other, right, are also deeply political, right? I mean, that the kind of critical interventions that they make, especially in achieving and working towards social justice. Would you, is this something you agree with?
I 100% agree that street art and graffiti have been used as a vehicle for change. It's, you know, a big part of speech.
Yeah.
The written letter is just, you know, speech. I think we tell it through pictures, we tell it through a combination of things, but certainly taking up real estate in humanities everyday lives. So if you're on your way to work and what you would otherwise be somewhat mundane, if all of a sudden you're forced to digest a message that a very smart, powerful, you know, artist decided to feed you on your way to work, it's very powerful. You know, we hope that it's a very powerful tool, and we hope that that genre is used for the right reasons.
I feel like you've given me so many good definitions to think about. I love that. As you said that too, I've been thinking, you all do so many great exhibitions, like pop-up thing, you know, with street artists in Miami, as you know, and well, certainly beyond our city borders and even national borders, working to recover histories that are too often lost because of kind of, you know, misguided notions, certainly, about what constitutes legitimate art, and what and also because of decades and centuries of anti-Blackness and prejudice that, of course, are still very much a part of everyday life in the United States and beyond. And as you noted, my goodness, as you guys opened just months before the pandemic, right? So as we now face another global pandemic, the novel coronavirus, I wonder if you could talk a little bit more, you started getting in there, how COVID in the past year have impacted you all at the Graffiti Museum, and how are some of the ways that you all kind of work to mitigate some of the you know, worst aspects of the closures, you know, the shutdown. Does that make sense?
So taking it from the top there, you know, we decided to embark on this because there is this group of marginalized artists who have changed society for the better by enhancing streets and essentially building communities across the entire world. Just like what Wynwood was 10 years ago, 15 years ago, it was a sleepy industrial neighborhood that no one had ever heard of. The only reason it became relevant was because the artists honed in on this neighborhood and painted here. So, you know, but nobody was celebrating these artists. You could have walked around Wynwood for hours and not learned a single thing about the actual artists. You might be able to learn about the developers or some of the people who are opening businesses here, but there was nowhere to learn about the technique behind spray paint. There was nowhere to learn about the history of the art form. And, you know, the museum set out to fill this void. And in the process, you know, what was certainly apparent from the outset is that because graffiti writers were marginalized due to the stigma associated with the spray paint and the way that the governments in New York City especially have treated graffiti writers, that, you know, many of these archives were not being taken seriously by mainstream institutions. You know, nobody was recovering Black books, the original kind of blueprints for this art form from the 1970s and the 1980s, and storing them appropriately or digitizing them or studying them. In reality, these are being kept in people's basements because this is such a young art form. You know, those are still, some of these archives are still in the possessions of the original creators of this. You know, we're not talking about Picasso here. You know, we're talking about a genre that is within, so not my life, didn't begin within my lifetime, but many people who are alive right now lived through the late 60s, early 70s when this came to light. So what we deemed, you know, to have these artifacts in people's basements or in their storage units, we really refer to them as very unstable archives. And we are doing our best to collect them, to preserve them, to digitize them, to study them, to, you know, archive them in terms of like not just preserving them, but having some type of organization to this, and to be able to find something that you're looking for, is the first part of, I guess, what you said. The second part of it was during COVID, how did we continue this mission? And by being closed to the public, it certainly gave my partner and I a um, much needed opportunity to do more of that work, because we weren't interfacing with the public every day. We could travel into different locations and recover things that we needed to recover. I know that a lot of people weren't traveling at that point. Obviously, we did it once we were allowed to and the coast was clear and things, we did it very safely. But the one-on-one time with some of the people that have this stuff, it was a very important time. In terms of keeping the museum afloat, we did a lot of the work that other institutions did. We pivoted to Zoom and Instagram and began an art talk program where we brought, during COVID, during the actual lockdown, obviously we're still in COVID, we're not in post-COVID time, but there's levels to this. When none of us were leaving the house at all, we started an art talk program where every single night we brought on a big deal graffiti artist, who is well known, well practiced, onto Instagram to have them tell their story. And the beauty of that was not only engaging our community and bringing them something at home that they really wanted and needed at the time, it was also our ability to record oral histories, I think, which kind of like spawned a little bit of our relationship with FIU and the Mellon Grant, and in order to continue the preservation of those. So there again is a lot of information.
Sorry, I asked a lot of questions.
Well, I have more. No, one of the things, I kind of have from the outside been watching you guys through all of this, the pandemic, and of all the institutions, it's so impressive the ways in which you guys pivoted, as you put it, with those art talks and so forth. It's hard not to notice and be amazed by the kind of what seems to be the tightness of the community globally. Because the speed with which you were able to get people to go and talk and be in conversation with you all was amazing. And impressive. The other aspect that I wonder if you would talk about is, since people couldn't go indoors, there was a lot of outdoors, right? So if you would talk some about the ways in which graffiti and street art allow for the mural painting and the occupying of public space and the meaning that that has had in particular during these COVID times. And of course, we want to hear about the amazing mural that documents Black American history.
Yeah, thank you for asking that, Rebecca. Certainly Instagram wasn't the only way we pivoted. Once folks were leaving their house, we implemented a bunch of new things into the museum. For instance, on the inside, you can take a complete audio tour by yourself. We never had that before. On the outside, we always had murals. I think we started off with 10 or 11 large scale giant murals by the world's best artists, and I think we're up to 16 right now. In the wake of the coronavirus, really at the height of the lockdown, was the tragic death of George Floyd that I think really mobilized a lot of graffiti artists back into that activism arm of their lives or their practice. And we felt very passionately about creating something in our community and rallying kind of our network in order to do something monumental and gorgeous and worthy of the victims of severe racism, the victims of police brutality. And we did that. And originally, if I could give you the full backstory quickly, is that we got on a call with the Wynwood bid, the Wynwood Walls, and begged and pleaded for a Black Lives Matter street, the same way that was being done in Washington, D.C. and across in major metropolitan cities across the country. I think, New York did one, and we were like, we're in Miami, we're in Wynwood, we're the national arts destination for the entire country. We need this. We need this. The city, was said no. There's too many complications. There's COVID. There's this. There's that. We heard every excuse in the book. And what the Museum of Graffiti decided to do was take matters into its own hands. Through that, what we did was we created a giant mural, the biggest one I think in all of Wynwood in terms of length. It covers 2 full buildings and the gates of a courtyard in between the 2 buildings, and it spells out American history in police caution tape. So when you're used to seeing that yellow strip, instead of saying caution or police line do not cross, it says American history. And in each one of those letters are photorealistic portraits of human beings who have made a difference in race relations in America. It starts at the time of slavery with the A, and in an A in American, the first A in American, I should say. It starts at the time of slavery in the 1880s and goes all the way through. And the Y in history is George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. And this was done by 8 artists over the course of 2 weeks. It was probably the project that my partner and I, or I don't want to speak for him, but the project that I am most proud of that we've ever worked on. Talk COVID, pre-COVID, post-COVID. I can't imagine there being something more beautiful and more important that we provided to our community, because we didn't stop there. What we did is we installed QR codes at every single letter in American history that told the story of each of these heroes. And, it brings you to a YouTube, for instance, the C in American. It shows you Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And if you scan the barcode that's next to the C, it'll take you directly to the I Have a Dream speech, so that this is an interactive educational tool for people of all races, for tourists from every country, from children to older folks. I think I've explained to you in the past, Rebecca, that we worked with experts on race relations in order to make sure that this was authentic and true, and that we didn't miss a beat in terms of including the right people at the right times. And, I was proud to admit to learning about new people and learning new things, and really diving deep into these stories. I became obsessed with Harriet and Harry Moore. I really became obsessed with that story. And it's a sad story. She didn't live because the colored hospital was too far away from her home at the time that I believe it was raided and destroyed. So
As it, thank you for sharing that, Allison. And if for those who haven't seen the mural, it is stunning. It is absolutely stunning, and such an important testament to the necessity, right, of different art forms in telling histories, especially Black history. It was so often kind of narrowly focused in, like, for a month, for like Black History Month, right? The kind of centrality of saying American history is Black history, and Black history is American history all year round, and the powerful nature. So, can you tell us a little more about where how people can see that mural, or where it is, or what's the future look like for these kinds of works?
unfortunately, Julio, it almost brings a tear to my eye and gets me a little choked up that I believe the mural is being destroyed currently. It's such a travesty. We called it American history instead of putting a full Black Lives Matter, so that not a single person could ever argue with this. Black Lives Matter has become somewhat of a politicized term. No one can argue with anything in the mural being 100% American history. At this point, the Black Lives Matter movement has become a piece of American history. So what we tried to put up there was something much bigger than just the movement that happened right now. We had to tell the whole story. And with the ever-changing landscape of Wynwood, it seems as though developers have taken it upon themselves to buy up the land that's here, noting how hot it is, how fun Wynwood is, how vibrant and beautiful, and have purchased these warehouses. The warehouses made sense for artists because there was blank canvases on every side, no windows. So I believe that the developers are currently working to puncture holes to create glossy storefronts that will eliminate all square footage for any artist to be able to come here and paint in Wynwood. If you took a tour of Wynwood right now, having not been there, it's a complete disaster. It's empty storefronts everywhere you turn. And construction sites where the original canvases and opportunities for public artwork have been completely removed. I venture to say that many of these developers are not from here, but believe that they were making wise financial decisions. And you know, the property owners, the original property owners, you know, are now generationally wealthy. And so, you know, they're very pleased and their families will live on, and they made wise decisions back in the day, but there's no one here regulating this. This is the Wild West in terms of what real estate developers can do and buy. The Wynwood bid has attempted to create some type of structure whereby if you put in glass fronts that you need to compensate somewhere else on the building in order to maintain art. But it's a farce in the sense of a lot of that empty space is being put in locations where it's completely inaccessible to organic artists. You know, if you're here from Germany and you're a world famous artist and you want to paint, there's no way that you're gonna, you know, be allowed to get up on a scaffolding or whatever and paint the third story of a building somewhere. It makes absolutely no sense. It's developers who are actually getting to curate these projects and developers who are getting to say what goes and what doesn't go, instead of the community at large having an organic flow that made this neighborhood what it is. And so will people continue to come here after it's all erased? Will the charm of this be gone? You know, we have to wait and see. I read today that the buildings on Northwest 2nd Avenue are becoming apartment buildings in the Real Deal today. So I think that Wynwood as we know it, and these opportunities for local organizations to take a grassroots stand and use graffiti as political messaging or as activist messaging like we did during COVID, I think these days are unfortunately coming to a fast end.
Wow, that is, I mean, I did not know the whole of that. That is really tragic. I wonder, I mean, this is just a thought, but I wonder what happens to Wynwood Walls if somehow Wynwood Walls becomes this like kind of museum and the past as everything changes. Like it's the one spot that you go, assuming that that remains, right? It just becomes this kind of museumized space as everything else transforms and Wynwood is no longer Wynwood. I don't know.
It's really interesting you bring that up, Rebecca, because the Wynwood Walls has already changed. You know, it's no longer offered to the public for free.
Right.
Is that right? I didn't even know that.
The Goldman family has decided to monetize it. You know, and so the olden days of public art for the benefit of the public are over.
I mean, truth, it's also kind of the evolution of this story, because it's not like the history of Wynwood is immune or has ever been immune to gentrification, right? I mean, it's the kind of continual as it's kind of compounded by a number of new forces, right? And that's this is really powerful to hear. And I think to kind of think about this as a form of political intervention too, is that graffiti has, as an art form, as a political movement, has also challenged this for decades, right? Like these kinds of stories.
I say this, yeah.
The power of this art to mitigate some of the worst aspects of this, but also, you know, they need our help, right? That is the support of this. How can we, Allison, our audiences best support the incredible work that you all at Graffiti Museum are doing, and support the graffiti artists themselves? How can we, and of course the communities in which they serve? What's the best way that we can do that?
Well, first and foremost, if you're here in Miami, I invite you to come be our guest at the museum. If you're tuning into this, I'm going to give you a very special gift. Because I love Rebecca and Julio so much, and I'm so honored to be on this call, I'm going to invite everybody watching this to come to the museum on us, or on the Wynwood bid rather. Use code Wynwood bid for free tickets to the museum.
Yeah.
Supplies last, of course, but I think that that's a major perk of being on this call.
Amazing.
You can join us for free. Please educate yourself on what's happening in Wynwood. Please educate yourself once you get inside the museum, and take our audio tour. You can follow us on Instagram and engage in our art talks. You can check out our website, museumofgraffiti.com. And one thing that you mentioned, Julio, about supporting the artists in general is that the Museum of Graffiti is not your mama's museum, as Kat and I like to say. It's not your average museum. We actually reserved a large portion of our square footage in order for living, breathing, active graffiti artists to show their current studio practice, what they're working on, and to make those for sale. So, it's not our mission to sell to every person that walks in, but if you are interested in supporting specifically graffiti artists, buy a piece of art by a graffiti artist, or buy a book about a graffiti artist, to keep this movement alive, to keep the interest going, to keep the thoughtfulness flowing. We do have a website that we never had before COVID. We never had an online site, but everything in our gift shop, which is one of my favorite parts of the whole museum, is available at museumofgraffiti.art.
It's wonderful.
I
Thank
can't,
you.
I can't say enough, by the way. I'm sorry. One, that's an incredibly generous offer. So thank you so much, Allison. And also, if for those who haven't been to the museum, holy, I was gonna say, perfect.
Julio.
It is transformative in its national scope, right? That it's a national and international scope. There's also like localized and regionalized scope. I mean, like there's just so many histories within this space that are so necessary for us at this time and always. But there's something that I feel that resonates especially true during these difficult times. So thank you.
Thank
Absolutely.
you. We need the help. We need the support. We want our community to come out and check us out and spread the word.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. We're almost out of time, but I can't help but ask about the Lady Pink exhibition, which is so amazing. If you could just say a little bit about the current exhibition, then we'll have to wrap up.
Okay, really briefly, what's on display right now at the Museum of Graffiti is the Lady Pink exhibition. It's called Graffiti Her Story, and it is a historical exhibition that looks back at the female pioneer of this graffiti art movement. Lady Pink Lady Pink really quickly moved here from Ecuador when she was 7 years old. While she was in high school in New York City in 1980, she had her first gallery show in high school as an immigrant female, and has not stopped practicing, has not stopped crushing it ever since. Her pieces are in the MoMA, her pieces are in the Brooklyn Museum. We are so proud to focus on her and shine a spotlight on her. It's very much well deserved. It is the first female solo show at the Museum of Graffiti. We're very young, so we have many more of those to come, but please come check it out. One room is dedicated to her life as an activist through her painting and other means, and the other room is dedicated to her role as a female graffiti artist, and shines light on the individuals who inspired her within the movement.
Thank you. Had to get that in.
I mean, and it's a stunning show. It's really, really, I feel like I keep on saying stunning, like it's my word of the day or something. Thank you so much, Allison. And thank you to Museum of Graffiti. Everyone check it out. Check out their website, check out their social media, and support them and their artists. Thank you to all of you for joining us, for the audience for listening and participating. Visit us online on Twitter, on Facebook, our YouTube channel. And be sure to join us at the same time, same link, for next week's episode of Coffee and Conversations, where Rebecca and I will be in conversation with the African American Research Library and Cultural Center, ARLAC. We are so thrilled and so excited for that. And thank you again to Allison and Museum of Graffiti. Take care, everyone.
This is so fun. I want to have coffee every week with you guys.
Every week.
Let's do it.
Bye, guys.
Bye, thank you.